Daphne, it's great to be with you again.
Great to see you, Aviv.
We've been exploring this idea of the journey through the ages. And part of this inquiry is to do with trying to deepen and understand the story of human life. But what else is this a part of for you? Where do you place, what is this idea of exploring the potential and the meaning that gets expressed through the different ages of a person's life? Where do you place this in your map of meaning and experience?
Every person has a desire to learn more about their role in the universe. And some people feel it more keenly than others. And I believe that I started to feel that when I was maybe a young person, maybe a teenager. And for a long time, I kept different aspects of my life separated because I thought that was what I had to do. And as I've gotten older, I've learned that integrating those components across leads to a richer experience for me as a professional person, as a mother, as a friend, as a wife. And so I feel like what we're doing is enabling me anyway to look forward to the next, hopefully 30 years of my life and understand where do I want to go? What do I want to do? Who do I want to surround myself with as I continue to learn and grow? So instead of shutting down and sort of narrowing my life, I feel like I've got a lot of my life left in front of me and it's opening up and it's quite transformative. So that's what it means to me.
So, in the way you're painting it, you're really describing three overlays in the inquiry. The first being getting to better understand one's place in the universe. The second being about the idea of getting better prepared, getting better ready to whatever the next stage is. And the third, therefore, living more fully as an integrated whole, whatever that whole means for you, into the next phases of your life. And so I agree with these three. And what I would like to propose is that we place the idea of the journey through the various ages inside an even bigger loom of influences. Because it's one out of, I'm going to propose 10 different layers of influence. You could propose more, but I thought today about 10. And actually the one that we are now exploring in the list I will run by you is going to be number 6, the journey map through the various ages. So again, this is about, for any person trying to inquire into my place in the universe. Who am I? What am I about? How can I better get to understand and appreciate myself, my life, my journey? And these are not necessarily by order of importance or by order of saliency or chronology of any kind. They simply follow an intuitive framing in the way it emerged in my morning reflection. The first influence is your upbringing. The parents, the house, the circumstance you were brought up in. And how that shaped and influenced you. And right after that is the second one, which is the time, the bigger time, and the culture you were born into. Like, for example, you were saying how earlier in life you felt that you needed to separate the different aspects of your life, the personal and the professional and so on, That was a typical framing into the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and whoever came of age through those decades, where professional life and personal life were really two almost completely separate entities. You were one person at work and one person in your personal life. And so for you, the journey of integration came with later stages of life that we are about to explore, what we will explore in the blue and the indigo. I'm proposing that our parents, the generation that was born before the Second World War or earlier generations, the culture and the time they were born into was a huge, big character in the shaping of who they were and what they were about. And I think we're seeing in recent decades the youngsters born into the 90s and those already born into the first decade of the 21st century, and those that the beautiful and courageous souls like my granddaughter who are joining us now, right? The context is different. The timing is different. The culture is different. People that are reaching their 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, right now around 2020, they will come of age into a decade of conflict and struggle and turmoil. It will shape the remainder of their life in a profound way. So I'd say that's overlay one, overlay two. The upbringing, the nearby family, house, circumstance that you were brought up in, and the time and the culture that you were born into. I think number three is the unique talent and gifts and passions and inclinations that you bring. So you discovered earlier on whether you're good in math or good in the arts or good in the athletic side of life, or whether you were good in managing and shaping the perspective of other people and corralling people, as I'm sure you discovered earlier on that you're very good at corralling people. Yeah.
It took me a little while to perfect my craft, shall we say.
It took you a while to perfect your craft, but at what age did you know that was a strength?
I actually did not know that it was a strength until later, until probably my 20s.
Okay.
Strangely enough. Yeah.
Interesting. But still, 20s is a good time to discover and test yourself, as we said when we looked at that decade. I think, so again, the generation coming of age now, because of the massive exposure, it's almost as though they are forced to discover their strength much earlier, in some way perhaps prematurely, such that they are squeezed to almost define themselves and their strength in what we call the orange phase, the 9, 10, 11, even 15, 16, rather than allowing for the discovery to ferment more in the 21 to 32, what we call the yellow stage.
One comment, I think that in Western culture, in this time now, there is tremendous pressure on children to excel and tremendous pressure to get them to pick something. I know when I was growing up, as a kid, there were things that you enjoyed doing, but you were outside playing all the time. And these children, for whatever reason, are not in that same situation. And there is definitely pressure for them to choose something and then work at it and become excellent. And I'm not sure how healthy that is, but I do think it exists.
Well, I agree, and I think it exists actually not just in Western countries. If you think about places like China and Korea, the pressure is even much greater.
Sure.
And you wonder what this drive for the emphasized narrow space of excellence and expertise, what is the benefit, but also what is the price, the cost? Because you're absolutely right. There is a perception that unless I excel in one domain, in one space, with one talent, preferably in computer sciences over the last couple of decades, maybe I will not be as successful or as whatever. So it's that, or if you discover that you have a talent that may match the drive and the currency that celebrities have in this day and age because of the social exposure of social networks and so on. But staying still in the frame we are exploring, I'm saying that your talents, your gifts, your inclinations, they are a unique dimension in terms of the influences shaping your journey and what you're about. And right there with it, close to it, but not exactly the same and often missed by many people, is what I will describe as the fourth overlay, which we have actually discussed in the corporate context when you were part of a team we worked with, and that was about the learning preferences, the discovery of how do I choose to learn, how do I choose to process, how am I wired? Am I a conversationalist? Am I a visual learner? Am I a kinetic learner? Do I prefer to read and internalize abstract concepts, or do I discover by reasoning and by dialogue? Those are all different ways that we process information, and they shape some of the choices we make, and then they shape some of the areas we excel in, and as a result they shape in part what we become. I propose dimension or influence 5 to be your personal type and the temperament nature. For some, this will resonate with the typology of the Enneagram or other typologies used in the corporate arena. I'd simply say there is a dimension that recognizes your temperament, how you are prone to show up, the kind of stress patterns that tend to show up with you. That's another important influencer of who you are becoming and getting to know yourself. The sixth influencer is the one we are exploring here, which is how you use the potential of each age. And we already explored in earlier conversations that, and we are now sensing into this idea that, if you experience your 20s inside the context of the last decade, or you're about to experience it in the coming decade, or in the 60s or the 70s, you have likely used the potential of that critical decade, which we call the yellow decade, in its own unique way because of the overlay to the time and the culture you were coming of age. In essence, what we are saying is that the map we are exploring is that the age bracket, and today we are about to explore the 42 to 52, the blue age, which we call experienced adult. I propose to think about it as a pool of potential. And we each apply ourselves into this pool of potential. We swim in that pool of potential, in part shaped by all those other influences we are looking at and through our choices. I waited all the way to the seventh influence to mention the astrological constellation. It is part of the equation.
It is.
It is part of the equation. And the last three I will mention, the unique place in this loom of influences that I'm proposing is that the first seven are largely shaped by influences. It's not that you didn't have any choice in the matter, you do have choices with all of those. But the three I'm about to reflect on, these are the influences where you play and your choice ability, your ability to choose becomes even more important. I propose that number 8 involves the values you choose to make central. And in fairness, these begin to be shaped in early age and certainly through your teenage. Are you the person where friendship and loyalty and collaboration are central values? Or do you choose to place independence, freedom, authenticity, sense of self over and above these? And we could place 40 or 50 or 100 other values and virtues in a map of meaning and preferences, which is part of a different line of inquiry. Just placing this now in context. And in the way these interrelate, each and every one is invited into the discovery of how much are the values that I have chosen to make central are truly my choice versus they were very much shaped by my upbringing or the culture I was born and raised in, or what I discovered in terms of my talent. So this is where the personal inquiry and the discovery of self is left for each one of us. I have coached and worked with people that into their 30s and 40s and 50s said to me, I've come to realize that where I placed importance in terms of values was very much an expression of my upbringing. And now that I'm more aware of it, it's not that I'm prepared to dismiss those values, but I see that I have a choice. I see that I have the capacity, the power to place another value as a central value for my life. And sometimes those values, they show up in context of the 9 and the 10th influence. So the 9th I'll describe as the core inquiry or the issue of your life. You could actually say that it's a central value around which other values are organized, or the cause of your life. Are you the person? Do you look at the world through the lens of, first of all, justice and fairness? Is this like the primary lens, and everything must first align to that as the central cause, the central issue of your life? Or is it the realization, the recognition, and this is where it may lead into the 10th influence and overlay there, where you say, what? The central issue, the central organizing principle of my life is that this life is a journey. It's a learning journey, it's a developmental journey, and it has a spiritual dimension to it. And so the 10th influence that I propose here is your developmental and spiritual journey. So we could practically take each of those 10 overlays and map them in one way or another, as much as we are mapping the chronological age, which we are saying is a transition through pools of potential. When I moved from age 50 to age 51 and then to age 52, I literally became aware that I was moving into new pools of potential. It was a very meaningful stage for me, the transition from 50 to 51 to 52, 53. These were very meaningful years. And I recognized that they each, rather than thinking that 52 was just a continuation of 51, I said, no. 52 was a new pool of potential opening up. That was partly the framing that came out of my number 10 influence, which was the developmental and the spiritual journey afforded me that outlook. And rather than thinking that 52 had to be the continual of 51 and in some way I was already locked in the journey, now I could swim into completely new horizons when I came into 52. My inquiry actually at the age of 52, which is 9 years ago, was it was a dual inquiry, and I'm realizing that I'm bastardizing my process here, because in a way we're jumping into the indigo without doing the blue first, but I'll just go with the flow because what I like about these conversations, they're not scripted, we're just going live. I ask myself at age 52, why do most people go through the same lesson time and time again? Why do most people hit the wall with their face straight on the same kind of struggle, similar pattern, just the details, who are the people involved, is changing, and every time it's more painful? Why was it so? I became fascinated by that inquiry. And it led me to the realization, the insight that what that was to do with, it involved what I categorized as karmic fixing. Karmic fixing is just borrowing the idea of karma in this, into the idea that unless a person becomes aware of the particular salient patterns of their life, they will tend to repeat these rather than become enlightened by the pattern, embrace the learning, and move into a new pattern. And I was very interested in the new pools of potential, because I recognized that one of the implications of the new pools of potential was that they presented actually a space that allowed me to move into a new pattern. And I did not want to proceed into my mid-50s with a pattern that was salient in my life from my 20s through to the late 40s. I knew I needed to change the pattern. And if I didn't change the pattern, I knew that it will cost me a lot, that I'll pay a heavy price. So these are the 10 influences, and a bit of a personal disclosure. I'm happy if you want to ask me about any of this, and or if not, we'll move into the blue, but the 42 to 52. But I did quite a bit of talking here, and I'm happy for you to lead it anywhere you like.
So I'm very interested to understand a little bit more about that last point. So when you realized that you had to change your pattern, were you at all, afraid is not the right word, but I can't think of a better word to describe it. So when I've become aware of patterns that I needed to change, there's a big change and a little change. And I found it much easier to affect small changes in my own life that have resulted in reasonable shifts in my pattern, as opposed to doing something completely different. So, maybe this ties into our discussion of the 42 to 52, because I engaged in some things there towards the end of that period that would have been characterized as very big changes, and they weren't very happy changes. They weren't happy. And it's when I've gone back and made small changes that were very deliberate that I've been able to sustain change and actually become happy.